is ambient, it is pervasive. Karl Marx said that all history is a history of class struggle. But what if history can be viewed as a tapestry of gendered politics? Today's event takes a multidisciplinary take on gender and history through a lens of society, media, and popular imagination. For the sake of illustration, the Department of History at Sister Nivedita University has chosen a set of film montages and is grateful to have a cohort of educationists to open up a multiplicity of dialogues on the sociological, psychological, and narratological understanding on gender and tease out the many notional strands around desire, domesticity, gender roles, and sexuality. What better way to show the performance of gender roles, as Judith Butler had argued, other than the medium of films? We are elated to have a luminary professor amongst us, Professor Dr. Shubir Dhor, to deliver the introductory address to the event. Could we have a round of applause? So please, if we could have you on the dais.
May I say that it's a pleasure to be here on stage today, particularly because in the audience there are some wonderful people who I like a very great deal. People like Professor Bula Bhattro or Professor Emeritus, people like my own DESNU contingent, and of course, Mollika here, Mollika Roy Chaudhary, head of the Department of History. These are going to be opening remarks, and Mollika initially told me that I'll have about 8 minutes time, not more. I'll try to make it within 8 minutes, but please excuse me and forgive me if I go beyond that time limit. To start off with, this is going to be a seminar on history and gender. And these words are interesting because, as Mollika pointed out, these are ideologically loaded terms in the sense they help you see the world around you. They help you come to terms with the realities that surround us every day of our lives. Now, I want to start off by using what we technically call a co-text or a context. You know, in cultural materialism or in new historicism, these are terms that we generally use. Now, the co-text or the context that I want to use is one that faces us, faces me at least, every day when I come to the university. For example, when you're moving in from, say, Technopolis, and you're going up the road to our university, you must have noticed that on the sides of the road, there are these, not pillars, but there are these fences which have 3D art painted on them. What are these arts? What do these arts say? Well, obviously, one which is particularly significant, I think, is one that says, "Ei poth jodi shesh na hoy." Now, this, if you remember, is a line from a song in a very famous hit film of 1961. The film was, of course, Shoptapodi, and this was Uttam Kumar and Suchitra Sen. Now, I'm going to start off from there. Why? Because you see, what you find in that line is something that I think is very significant for us today, reading history, reading humanities, looking at the realities around us. Why? To start off with, you have to think of a person called Walter Benjamin. Walter Benjamin wrote a very important essay. This was in the 1930s, early in the 1930s. Walter Benjamin wrote this essay called The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. And what does he say? It's a brief essay, not a very long one. And here, essentially, among other things, he says that, you know, art has got a particular aura of its own. This aura was being democratized with the coming of the mechanical reproduction. Obviously, he was talking about films, cinema, and which is where I really want to step in. Because you see, he is arguing that art as such, which is of a cultic, almost like a cult, this cult is being dissolved, and people are now accessing art in larger and larger numbers, which is made possible by mechanical reproduction. That's one concept. Now, the other concept that I would like to introduce is by a French historian, a man called Pierre Nora, or Noha. Pierre Noha wrote a very important text. In fact, it was a very long work, a work in progress almost, which was called Le Lieu de Mémoire, that is, the places of memory, or as I prefer to call it, the sites of memory, S-I-T-E-S, sites of memory. What does Nora talk about? Nora is saying that in the 1970s particular, and in the early 1980s in Europe, there was a crisis in historical writing. And he says that certain images, certain tropes, certain significant cultural significances in popular culture are being memorialized, are being represented in terms of art. Now that is where I want to link up what I described on the railings of the road leading to our university, that famous line from that famous song, what was it? Ei poth jodi shesh na hoy. Now what I want to suggest is that you see, what we are really seeing is this line from this very popular film and a very popular song also. This line is a line, a text if you want, which is actually indicating a kind of a memorization, a memorialization of a historical fact. In other words, you see, what is happening is this line is being used as a kind of a signifier of a cultural understanding. But if you look a little deeper, if you look at it more closely, let us say, you will also notice that this line, Ei poth jodi shesh na hoy, which of course, immediately you read it, makes you remember the iconic scene in the film in which Uttam Kumar, the hero, is riding on this big bike, it's a bullet, and the heroine, Suchitra Sen, is perched behind him, and she's sitting, incidentally, side saddle. And, the song goes on, and you remember that scene very vividly, don't you? Now, the point is, if you remember this scene, you're also remembering a kind of a cultural connotation that this scene or this episode in the film is suggesting to you. What is it? First of all, notice the whole idea is that the woman is in literally the back seat. Number two, the man, the hero, he is in control of this big bike. And you see, what it really suggests, what it really implies is the fact that you're kind of getting a kind of a picture of a gender stereotypification. In the sense, the hero is masculine, macho, let us say. The woman, on the other hand, behind him, sitting behind him, is obviously subordinate. In other words, you see, a kind of a construction of popular notions of gender are being constructed. And this film, this line of film, which is made almost into a quotation of history, because don't forget, 1961, 2023. In the years that have elapsed, this is how, in the popular imagination at least, we are constructing history. History no longer in terms of the great achievements of the past, history in terms of popular culture. And that is what this slogan painted on the fencing on the road, beside the road, is suggesting to us. Let me also indicate, if you think of it, popular culture is almost never, ever interrogative. That is, you see, popular culture is about the propagation and the re-registration of stereotypes. Let me give you an example. One film that many of you, I'm sure, have seen is a film called Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge. Remember? What is that film about? Quite interestingly, actually, that film is premised on a very patriarchal idea. The idea of Shomprodan, the giving away of the bride by either the father or a masculine member of the family. Now, And the whole film is really on that. You know, despite the film showing that the hero and the heroine are going against their family's wishes, etc., think of the last scene. It's only when the father has given permission that his daughter gets married to the boy of her choice, it's only then you see that the girl who's standing on the platform as the training is moving off with the hero on it, it's only then that the girl starts running and jumps on the train to be ultimately united with the hero. Once again, you see, the idea is women are commodities who have to be given away by the male presence in the family. And this is a film which, despite its popular notion, is actually underscoring the same idea. So as I was saying, you see, popular culture really reinforces the gender stereotypes that we have, because interrogation is not really part of popular culture. Now, from what Mollika has told me, you're going to see 2 or 3 snippets, sequences from 2 or 3 films. These are films which are quite interesting, because you see, is any film popular culture? Certainly not. Because you see, if you think of the films of Satyajit Ray, for example, would you say that Satyajit Ray is quote-unquote popular culture? Perhaps not. So maybe, you know, one should discriminate between, let's say, ordinary popular culture, low popular culture, and maybe, quote, high, unquote, popular culture. So you see, popular culture is something which is extensive. And in some instances of popular culture, particularly of the thinking type, the Satyajit Ray type if you want, you do get an interrogation, you do get a questioning, you do get a new insight into how we can reimagine gender. These are concepts that I'm sure are going to be thrown up in today's discussion. But everyone, just a small personal request. You see, a seminar without questions and answers, a seminar without interrogations, a seminar without debate is like a body without a soul. So make this seminar, please, a living one. And ask questions, disagree, agree, comment, pass comments, and let's make this a lively session today. Thank you very much. For now, I am also looking forward to the presentations and the clippings. Thank you.
We could not have a better opening address. Thank you, Professor Dr. Shubir Dhar. You've opened up questions about the variegated nature of popular culture, a huge takeaway, and something that reminds me of Robert Darnton's idea of the highbrow and the lowbrow culture. Without further ado, I think we would like to see a few of the film montages that have been suggested by our first panel, comprising Professor Dr. Bula Bhodro, Professor Emeritus and Director of Center for Interdisciplinary Studies. I would like to always co-opt Professor Bhodro as one of ours. That's why I keep blurting out historical, but she's a person who's a master of all trades. Professor Oninita Mukherjee, head of psychology, and perhaps one of the most congenial colleagues I've come across in my entire, very limited career span so far, and Professor Dr. Madhuchanda Rai Chaudhary, Associate Professor of DESNU. We are no strangers to all of them. Could we have a round of applause for all of them? I'm just soliciting a suggestion from the panel. Would you like to see the film montage from the couch, or should you? Okay, so we'll screen the first set of film montage. I'd request all of you to please put your phones on silent. I believe there would be some copyright issues, so we will not stream it right away. Could we have the lights switched off? Thank you.
চল রে চল সবে ভারত সন্তান।
প্রশ্ন করব ম্যাম থেকে আমরা সবাই শুনতেই চাইবো ম্যাম সোশিওলজিক্যাল ইমাজিনেশনে আমরা পাবলিক প্রাইভেট ডিভাইডটা কিভাবে দেখব ঘরে বাইরে opens up a gamut of questions on modernity tradition the idea of the ideal woman also shohodhormini which is a concept that was coming up in 19th century and the entire gamut of questions that Partho Chatterjee brought up in his Nation and its Fragments. How would you place gender and sociological imagination in the late 19th, early 20th century?
Actually, let me go a little chronologically, not exactly the way montage is presented. But in sociological imagination, if you take the term per se, there is a criticism of distinction between public and private. There is public and private, but there is a criticism entailed in terms of application of the sociological imagination, specifically by a group of feminists. So sociological imagination is a dynamic concept which kept changing from 1960s onwards when it was first actually uttered by C. Wright Mills, the American sociologist. But if we take it back, let's sort of apply it going backwards to say, like yesterday's mathematical theory of predicting future, etc. Ghore Baire, to my sociological imagination, is a conservative movie. And Rabindranath, I find, is conservative in the sense, from the point of view of 21st century. Of course, at that point of time, Rabindranath was not conservative, because everybody is actually measured, or rather evaluated in terms of the time he or she is situated. Rabindranath's position was not conservative that time, rather it was somewhat brave that Bimala could come outside. And Ghore Baire is a classic treaty in terms of looking at the division then broken, and division then reinforced by the fact that she took away her so-called sympathy, love, emotion, support from Shondeep, saying that, you lied to me. You are not, Shondeep is not a character of integrity. Rabindranath purposefully, I thought, because he was not appreciative of the kind of Swadeshi that time was practiced, portrayed Shondeep that way, that Shondeep is not really totally an integrate person. But the opposite might exist, that one might be doing Swadeshi, at the same time may not be like Shondeep, maybe even like Nikhil. Nikhil is the protagonist for Rabindranath, but a passive protagonist who does not assert even when he believes that his wife is having some kind of romantic emotion for his friend, can't say something like Bhadralok syndrome, even if my wife is having a little bit of mental affair or even whatever she's having, I rather as Bhadralok, I keep my mouth shut and maintain this Bhadralok image even to Bimala. Shondeep's attempt to maintain his sort of husbandly activities to Bimala is that it's very mild, mute. I don't force you, I don't coerce you, you're free. But Rabindranath did not actually tell us in so many words that Nikhil is constrained, or told us that in so many words, in whichever way you look at it, Nikhil is constrained, a constrained character. Shondeep is outgoing character. Bimala is choosing between one pole to the other pole, and society never allows us, through its majority mandate, to choose this way. So somewhere you have to be located in the middle. Here Bimala is somewhat in the middle, giving Shondeep away the ornaments, then it comes through the other person, and then Shondeep giving it back to say, put that I took the money and your integrity of ornaments are given. And Nikhil never telling Bimala, this is what I want, but wanting very different things from Bimala, but never told. So I do not know, this is obviously a conjecture because Rabindranath is not here to reply to any of us, so that's a disadvantage, no doubt about it, that Rabindranath was in two minds. he was between public and private. He doesn't really know the answer. He did not really know the answer by himself, or he deliberately did it to tell us that what's wrong at that point of time. And since Rabindranath's nationalism brand is very different, whether we agree, disagree is a different point. But Rabindranath's nationalism was different, we all know that. So Rabindranath is portraying actually the nationalist position Rabindranath believes in through Sandeep, or Rabindranath is talking about women coming out. I'm not sure of it. I found Rabindranath somewhat dwindling. People may disagree with this point, but somewhat dwindling and giving an impression that Rabindranath is not 100% sure. Or that is the merit of the novel, that gives us opportunity, gives us open opportunity to say, well, this could have been happened, that could have been happened.
Fascinating take, madam. I would like to pose a question to Professor Anindita Mukherjee now, trying to understand, je, psychologically speaking, Bimola, Poroma, to some extent Aditi Pandit's character, all of them have this one thing common: the extramarital. From being corseted, from being closeted, these women find respite, perhaps not so much for Bimola, but certainly for Poroma and Aditi, in finding a mental, a spiritual, perhaps an emotional partner outside of marriage.
I just want to add here so that Anindita picks up on that. I would think Bimola was very, very sure that she is having an affair. That is why she keeps telling her, Rabindranath wanted this sentence in Bimola, that Swadeshi na thakle ami keno thakbo. Then Sandeep is the bravest one, would say that Swadeshi chhadao ami tomake chai, ami tomakeo chai, Swadeshi chai. So your take on that.
এই প্রশ্নটা তো থাকবেই প্রফেসর মুখার্জি। মানসিকতার দিক দিয়ে বিমলা, পরমা, অদিতিকে আপনি কোন ধাঁচে ফেলছেন?
আচ্ছা, থ্যাংক ইউ। প্রথমে আমি একটু জানাতে চাই আমাকে ইনভাইট করার জন্য। থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ। সো যে কোয়েশ্চেনটা এখানে আমাকে করা হয়েছে, এই যে ক্যারেক্টার, তাদের এক্সট্রাম্যারিটাল অ্যাফেয়ার হচ্ছে, তাদের মাইন্ডসেটটা কীরকম ছিল বা কোন ক্ষেত্রে গিয়ে তারা সেইটা ভাবে, তাই তো? তো আমি যদি এই ত্রিকোণ প্রেম বা ট্রায়াঙ্গুলার লাভের কথা ভাবি, তাহলে একটা খুব সুন্দর সাইকোলজির একটা থিওরি আছে আমাদের রবার্ট স্টার্নবার্গের, ট্রায়াঙ্গুলার থিওরি অফ লাভ। একটা মানুষের মধ্যে কীভাবে লাভটা জেনারেট করছে। ফার্স্ট যেটা আমরা দেখি সেটা হচ্ছে প্যাশন বা ফিজিক্যাল নিড একটা আসে, সেটাকে প্যাশন বলছে। তারপরে কথা বলে ভালো লাগা, লাইকিং, সাইকোলজিক্যাল ফ্যাক্টরস আসে। ফাইনালি গিয়ে কমিটমেন্ট আসে, যেটা সোশ্যাল। তো বায়োসাইকো সোশ্যাল মডেলে যদি আমরা এটা দেখি, এরকমভাবে ধীরে ধীরে একটা সম্পর্ক গড়ে ওঠে। তারপরে সম্পর্কটা চলতে থাকে, সব কিছুরই পজিটিভ নেগেটিভ দিক আছে। দেখা যায় আস্তে আস্তে শুধুমাত্র হয়তো সোসাইটির জন্য কমিটমেন্টটা থেকে যায়, ফিজিক্যাল পার্ট আর সাইকোলজিক্যাল পার্টটা কোথাও কোথাও ল্যাক হতে থাকে। সেই ক্ষেত্রে দাঁড়িয়ে একটা মানুষ, আমি কোনো মহিলা পুরুষ বলছি না, কিন্তু কোনো একজন মানুষের ক্ষেত্রে সুতোগুলো কীরকমভাবে খুলতে শুরু করে, প্রথমেই তার এই ফিজিক্যাল নিডের জায়গাটা কমতে থাকে, প্যাশন কমে যায়। তারপরে সাইকোলজিক্যাল ইন্টিমেসির জায়গাটা, যেটা আমি বলছি লাইকিং, সেখানে অনেক পজিটিভ আর নেগেটিভ আসপেক্ট আসতে শুরু করে। সেই মানুষটার অনেক ভালো গুণ আছে, যেখানে আমরা দেখলাম বিমলা বলছে যে অনেক ভালো গুণ আছে আমার স্বামীর মধ্যে, আমি শ্রদ্ধা করি সেই জন্য, বাট তিনি খুব ঠান্ডা। নেগেটিভটার ওপর আমরা হয়তো বেশি জোর দিতে শুরু করি, আমাদের ফোকাসটা থাকে পজিটিভের দিকে কিছুটা, বাট মেন ফোকাসটা চলে যায় হলো আমাদের নেগেটিভের দিকে, আর পেরিফেরিতে চলে আসে আমাদের পজিটিভ আসপেক্টগুলো। এইবার ধীরে ধীরে শুধুমাত্র কমিটমেন্টের জন্য মানুষটা পড়ে আছে, সোশ্যাল কমিটমেন্ট। এবার সেইখানে গিয়ে আমাদের জেন্ডার রোলটা চলে আসে। মহিলাদের ক্ষেত্রে কমিটেড থাকবো মানে আমি আর কোনো জায়গায় অ্যাটাচড হতে পারি না, কিন্তু মেল তারা হয়তো অনেক জায়গায় ইন্টারাকশন তাদের কাজের জন্য বা তাদের স্বভাবের জন্য তারা করতে পারে। এইবার ধীরে ধীরে আমি যদি আসি যে অন্য কোনো সম্পর্কে তারা কিভাবে ঢুকছে, আবার আমায় সেই সুতো দিয়েই বাঁধতে হবে। ফার্স্টে আসে এখানে উল্টো দিক থেকে, কমিটমেন্ট তো সে একটা অন্য আরেকজন মানুষের সাথে হয়ে আছে। এবার একজন মানুষের সাথে হয়তো তার পরিচয় হলো, তার ফার্স্টে লাইকিং বা সাইকোলজিক্যাল অ্যাট্রাকশনটা আসে, তার ভালো ভালো দিকটাকে আমরা বেশি করে ফোকাস দিতে শুরু করি, নেগেটিভ জিনিসটা আমরা হয়তো একটু ওভারলুক করে যাচ্ছি, তারপরে ফাইনালি গিয়ে ফিজিক্যাল নিড বা প্যাশনের দিকে আসে। তো এইরকমভাবেই একটা মানুষ কিন্তু একটা সম্পর্ক থেকে আরেকটা সম্পর্কের মধ্যে জড়িয়ে যায়। তো এটা একটা আমার অ্যানালিসিস।
কত কিছু আমরা জানতে পারছি আজকের সেশনে। In a world where we are all riddled with the idea of red flags, especially when you are talking about relationships, I think the psychological understanding that Professor Mukherjee just exposed us to is very, very crucial. Professor Roy Choudhury, I think without thinking as much as now that I'm thinking about it, almost all the movies are based on some novel or the other. Ghore Baire to botei, Ijazat, as we can see, was based on Shubodh Ghosh's 1964 novel. And so was Astitva. It was actually based on Guy de Maupassant, Jean et Pierre. Poroma, you can understand, it is taken bits and pieces of the circulating literature, Bani Boshu, Asha Purna Devi to some extent, and then it paves a new feminist model in some ways in the 1980s about what about the identity of the woman beyond her domestic realm. How would you, as a person from literature, look into the narratological device of laying out the trope of the woman who is transgressing the threshold, as it were?
Right. Thank you so much, Molika, for the question as well as for the invitation. I would like to take it up from the angle of narrative itself. What is narrative? It is telling a story, right? And writing a story. Now, what we see in many of these clippings that we saw, and I would particularly like to focus on Poroma a little bit, and then Ijazat, and then Ghore Baire also, is that we are seeing how not only the female characters, but at times the male characters too, are formulating a new narrative, telling a new story. Sometimes it is happening through explicit dialogue or explicit statements, in case of Bimola. Sometimes it is happening implicitly through the way the camera is focusing, the way the lensing is happening. So just to give you an example, if we just start with Ghore Baire, we didn't see that particular clip, but if we concentrate on the second clip where Bimola, where there's this conversation between Bimola and Shondip says, "Ami apnar shonge boishoik byapare kotha bolte chai na." Where is this coming from? It's coming from one of the ramifications of a patriarchal society. Now, patriarchal society is, of course, much more complex than just a male-dominated society. It has multiple ramifications, and one of the ramifications is financial authority. Who has the financial authority? Who controls the purse strings? And that is where it's coming from. So you're a woman, Shondip is saying, what he's basically implying is that you're a woman, I'm not going to talk business with you. And Bimola is creating her own narrative by challenging that stereotype, typical idea of a woman, and she's insisting that he talk business with her. Later on, in a clip which we didn't get to see, where Bimola says, "I am going to provide you financial assistance," and Shondip says, "Tumi kintu tomar goyna bechte parbe na." And Bimola retorts by saying, "Taka debo bolechi, takai debo." And what she comes back with is a whole packet of mohor, gold coins. Why? Because that's the assertion of her financial authority, and therefore the assertion of her independence of the patriarchal shackles. So that is how it's being formulated. In case of Poroma, if we just contrast the two clips that we saw, the first clip was almost the opening of Poroma, where we see that Poroma is center stage, right? Apparently she's center stage. She's being focused on. The camera is always on Poroma pretty much. Everybody is asking, "Bodi, okay ki debo? Shono, kalke ki porbo?" And so on and so forth. So, ironically, although Poroma is center stage, her identity is getting marginalized, if not erased. Because everybody is calling her either Kakima or Bodi or Shuncho, Shono, not even her name, right? If it had been a Western society, her husband would have called out Poroma. No. So even though she is at the center, and this is another kind of a myth that patriarchy builds around women, that, oh my God, you're the caregiver, you're the center of everything. But there is a very smart tactic of actually marginalizing, if not erasing, a woman's identity. And that is what is happening with Poroma. And then, look at the lens through which she is seen. She's being photographed by Rahul. So she is being seen through a male gaze. And it is that Rahul who will ironically also be the springboard for her rebellion against the patriarchal shackles, because she will step out of the bounds of marriage, which of course will lead to her ostracization. So her initial stepping out of the marriage construct is with the help of a man. But then if we contrast that to the last scene of, almost towards the ending of Poroma, the very interesting scene is, if you just look at Poroma's physical appearance, she's completely shorn of all the makeup, all the external signifiers of a married woman, if not of a woman itself. Her hair has been cropped short. She's dressed in white sari, completely white. She has no ornaments. There's no color red anywhere, no shidur, no alta, nothing. She's shorn of that. And yet, that identity is her salvation. She has never been more free. So even though she's dressed like a bidhoba, which is supposed to be the most shackled, most ostracized version of a female, she is as free as she can get, because she's saying, I want to work. So that's financial independence. And secondly, if you see, if you look at that scene, Aparna Sen's character gives her the newspaper clipping which has news of her lover. What does she do? She looks at it, she leans out of the window and let that clip of newspaper just drift away. And that is her letting go of that crutch which she needed to step out of the marriage, the oppression of a marriage, oppression of a patriarchal society. Secondly, she's leaning out of the window into the open air, into the open sky. Again, salvation. And in the background, we hear the azan. So therefore, that spiritual salvation is coming in. And the third movie, I'm not talking about Astitva so much, because I think the clipping was quite explicit as to what Tabu's character is saying, that why are you creating these binaries between what a man wants and what a woman wants? We both want the same thing, and yet if I err, you consider it a sin. If you err, it's considered an error. Because if we remember the movie, her husband too was unfaithful, but he was never ostracized. It was characterized as, oh, it's the male's prerogative. He has physical needs, so of course he would satisfy it. So why not the wife? Why not have the same standards for the wife? And finally, if we come to Ijazat, Ijazat is a very interesting movie, because what we see in Ijazat is that how patriarchy victimizes not just the woman but also the man. Because in Ijazat, we have Nasiruddin's character, who is forced to marry Rekha and not the love of his life, Maya, because Rekha's, the father figure, says, you had once vowed that you would marry her, honor your vow. You were engaged at some point 5 years back, and therefore you marry her. So who is the victim here? Again, it's patriarchal society. It's dictating, it's the patriarch of the family who's dictating what Nasiruddin should do, and therefore what these three characters, in the direction in which these three characters' life would go. But what we see here as a challenge to patriarchy is that what should have been the proper, what should have been the conventional expectation? That it would be a love triangle, right? And the other woman, that is Maya's character, would obviously be the shadow, the invisible shadow. Yet, in the scene that we saw, we see a bond between them emerging. And a sisterhood almost emerging between Rekha's character and Maya's character. And what is also very ironical is that scene follows on the heels of the fact that Rekha is sending back the things that she had left behind. Her objects as well as her letters. And she comes back with a telegram saying, what about those moments? Can you send me back those moments? And if you look at the scene carefully, Rekha is leaning on her husband and she's crying. So instead of becoming a love triangle, it becomes a unique bond. Yet again, a challenge to patriarchy.
She's opened up so many different avenues of talking about identity, gender. The very nature of relationships is very complex. And when I talk about relationships, especially a gendered relationship, one notion that keeps coming up is that of agency. Professor Bhodro, as an eminent sociologist, how do you place the notion of agency when you posit Bimola versus Tabu's character in Astitva?
See, I'll go a little offbeat in terms of explanation. Neither of the four characters, to me, are quite agentic. But I found agency in the woman who actually was engaged to marry Tabu's daughter. I forgot the name of Ostitto actually. So when she comes, that scene has not been shown, but when she comes, she said a very important line. Don't think that I'm not marrying you because you're an illegitimate child, not the word illegitimate word, but the way you were born. But I'm not marrying a very egotistical, narrow-minded attitude like a person like you, because I consider myself, representative of a generation who is far more broad-minded, liberal, without any prejudice. And that is why she came to pick up Tabu. That Tabu needs now help. She is alone. She doesn't work. She doesn't have any waged work. She has been actually working in her household for the last so many years, and very, very faithfully. Never thought that there is something wrong, etc. But accepted it. Until and unless this particular incident has blown up, as she said, the umbilical cord with my grihosthi is cut by this particular incident. Now, from here, to me, Rahul is an agency in a different way. How Rahul is agentic to Paroma? It was Rahul actually unleashed whatever desires Paroma had, going out, going for a ride, go somewhere, enjoy the world outside the parameters of the home and the so-called invisible rules of patriarchy, which were actually Paroma thought is Parom, is something very important for her to do every day without question. See, three of these women did not question for a long time. When questioned, the separation was inevitable. When one important thing comes out from this, and also with Rekha, the moment Rekha didn't question why Nasiruddin was loving Maya and still agreeable to marry her. Why did she? Why Dadu? If Dadu calls, cannot say no. Why is that? Rekha didn't question up to that. Didn't even question Maya's existence up to a while. Until unless Maya's physical position is coming to her home, then she got scared. All four women actually are saying one thing, or rather all four film directors, at least I understood it, that there is an underlying line, a semiotic position of all these signs are that the moment you say no to the establishment, to the role everybody is actually habituated to see you, your existence is at jeopardy. Bimola's existence was jeopardized until and unless Bimola would have gone back. We don't know what Rabindranath would have said, but I suspect Rabindranath here guilty of not giving woman the freedom actually Bimola deserves. And Shandip's condescending husbandship, that I'm teaching you English, I'm giving you this opportunity, that opportunity. It's like saying every opportunity or window is opened by me, and you better enjoy the fresh air. You don't like the air, then you are not entitled to the other airs, which other windows can open. That's what the conflict between the Bimola is facing between Shandip and Nikhil. She would also like to have both of them, because both of them are important. Now, the moment a woman would say that no, and both are important to me, like Paroma said that, I want Rahul's companionship. That time, the patriarchy rejects her. But her husband had several affairs. He used to look at her secretaries in different places in the body with a clear sexual look. But that didn't matter. What mattered is Poroma's affair with Rahul and Poroma's picture of part of the body being exposed by Rahul. So obviously Rahul is an unknowing agent here for Poroma, who opens up a different world. The world Poroma is now ready, probably, with a little help from Aparna Sen, I think, that getting a job and going out. And her daughter realizes that. She is also an agent in disguise, that Ma, this is that particular tree. Isn't that the particular tree? And she smiles approvingly with Poroma. So to me, not the heroines are particular agents. Rather, these are the agentic factors, not in operation properly, but underlying position is that author or the director has given them, actually Subodh Ghosh has given Rekha that particular position, that Rekha was not agentic at all. Rekha was quite subdued, quite submissive, accepting everything. At some point of time, Rekha thought no more and became the agent, because we don't find other people in there. Of course, one other patriarchal position from Gulzar, I would say, bringing up Shashi Kapoor in the last. Why would Rekha need a second husband? To show that she is really independent. I mean, Shashi Kapoor's 1 minute was very attractive, that role, the 1 minute role Shashi Kapoor played. But the question comes to my mind that why would Rekha need a Shashi Kapoor to tell that Rekha is fine without Nasiruddin? Rekha was uncomfortable while living with Nasiruddin, between love and hatred, between lie and truth. So Rekha is fine while teaching music to the children. Shashi Kapoor is not needed, and Shashi Kapoor, like Nasiruddin, also do not need to carry the match to light up the cigarette. Rekha is there. So even in the end, Gulzar is somewhat weak, becomes a little bit of weak for giving Rekha the full independence, whereas in Poroma that doesn't happen. So for me, the agenting position is not a static one. The agency varies in terms of the situations, context, location, and some other agents are added to that extent.
I think we also have to, incorporate the idea of who's directing the movie. Poroma, for instance, was created, directed by Aparna Sen, and Gulzar, he adapted it with a lot of nuance, giving the devil his due. But again, this was a readaptation of Tapan Sinha's movie as well.
It took Gulzar a long time to give Rekha a divorce.
Right.
A longest time of the movie, Rekha is married to Nasiruddin.
Absolutely. যখন আমরা এই মানসিকতার ব্যাপারে ভাবছি বা বুঝতে চেষ্টা করছি, একটা তো there are books that have done a lot of disservice. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. This binarization of different psyches has led a wedge in the empathy that should have been built between men and women. তো অনিন্দিতা ম্যাডাম, আপনি আমাদের একটু সাইকোলজিক্যালি একটু আমাদের বোঝান যে আমি একজন নারী, পুরুষদের মাথায় কি চলে, আর ওদের কি মনে হতে পারে যে নারীদের মানসিকতায় জগৎটা এতটাই ডিফারেন্ট কেন আমাদের থেকে?
লাইনটা খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট, একটু অ্যাড করে দিই। তাবু বলছে যে পুরুষের মন আর নারীর মন কি আলাদা, আমি যা চাইতে পারি, what I can actually want. Suppose I wanted a physical relationship with the teacher. I liked him. I liked his body. Tabu doesn't say that, but underlying position is that we're not different. I may like some man's body and like to have a physical affair with him, but doesn't mean that I am committed to him, like I am committed to you mentally. So this is the position that I would ask also Anindita to reflect on. Is Tabu correct?
Yes. Thank you. It's a very, very good question. Yes, what Tabu said that is men's need and women's need are different. Actually, no. Biologically, psychologically, socially, I have a question, but biologically, psychologically, no. Needs are same. Both are having same almost same biological factors, but society, hierarchy, I think this is what Bula ma'am can say it better, that what in the societal factors that actually made the men and women think that yes, they are different. So I really want to know from you, ma'am.
বুলা
Question
ম্যামের
comes
সঙ্গে মধুচন্দা দিয়েও যদি একটু অ্যাড করতে পারে, we've come across reddit subreddits which say men writing women, where there's a very unfair idea that is posited on the character of the woman.
I wouldn't say that men writing women.
You know,
Men may write, then we are again differentiating between women writers and men writers. I won't do that. I would say social construction. See, social construction of desire and sexuality here. Women cannot want to be with somebody just physically. This is a taboo. I want some man's physique, body. আমার তোমাকে দেখতে ভালো লাগছে এটা মেয়েরা বলতে পারবে না।
with the recent Ranveer Singh, Deepika Padukone
Of-
blow up
out
on the
of that,
coffee
out
with
of that.
Karan thing.
I mean,
and it's very important for us that why
Now,
social,
problem with
societal
celebrities is celebrities to us actually to some extent bodies.
Absolutely, but the gaze and the idea of who is representing whom,
Yeah.
who is viewing whom, it's all social construct, and the
It's
writer is
construct.
also product of the social construct, the environment, the milieu that he's a part of, he or she, sorry, or whoever they want to identify themselves as. আমার দুজনকেই এই প্রশ্ন, how do we then bridge the divide between the binarizations or the binaries that we create within a very heterosexual imagination of
In
society?
sociology class, we give one line answer. Consider us individuals. Just individual human. We are neither born girl or boy. We are told at some point of time that you are a girl, you are supposed to behave that. You are a boy, you are supposed to behave that. There are two different toilets. You know, now in advanced capitalist countries now, I went to Melbourne in June and saw unisex toilets. Why should this happen that if we enter into the same toilet with men, we automatically think that we are in a zone where we can be abusive and we can be abused? So this is a construction. Separation is a construction. Little boys do not get up in the morning, or little girls, and say, I am a girl, I am a boy. The parents or the surrounding circumstances tell them, you are a girl, you have to behave this way. You are a boy, you have to behave this way. You cover yourself up because you are a girl. And you can show yourself, you can wear Bermuda and take Nobel Prize. Doesn't matter. Because you are a man. Nobel Prize niyecho to Bermuda te. So it's okay. But suppose in bikini somebody is accepting Nobel Prize. Everybody will forget about the Nobel Prize and talk about the bikini.
Yeah,
So it is Mondhu Chanda's now part to show it literary narrative way, but I think it's properly constructivism. It's
No,
constructed.
Absolutely. I do agree, ma'am, that it is very, very, it's definitely a matter of construct, because just, I mean, to carry on your example of the toilet, I mean, what happens at our home? Do we have a male toilet and a female toilet? Obviously not. Then why is there a separation when we are venturing out into the public space? Because that also boils down to the discussion between what is private and what is public, and what is privately. What are the gender roles privately? What are the gender roles publicly? Right? So many of us hear this thing of, oh, when you're going out in public, be a certain way, behave a certain way, don't behave like a boy. Madrami korona is a very common thing that women hear. Lokhi mein ho. And unfortunately, to smaller or larger extent, we are all part of that, and we are all co-opted by that narrative. Of course, you know, it is individually we need to challenge that. Of course, if talking of literary perspective, we have so many authors who chose to write under masculine names, but if you look at their narratives, are they really writing the conventional woman's narrative? So eventually, of course, we discovered who they are, and imagine the shock of society as to, oh my God, so you tried to box us, now look how we have conned you. So there is an element of subversion there as well. Sometimes subversion doesn't always happen directly. These are insidious way of subverting, acting in a way like a trickster, where you're pretending to conform to society or societal norms while you're pulling the rug from under the carpet. right? And I think everybody here, people who know me, will start laughing because I think this text has become almost my alter ego. So at the risk of being laughed at, I will have to mention Mary Shelley. There you go. So, and this is something that, of course, I keep on mentioning in class. And also, pardon me, because I just came out of a class where I was teaching Mary Shelley. So, so if you remember, the novel that she's most famous for, Frankenstein, when it first came out, it did not have her name. It came out anonymously, but look at the irony here. It came out anonymously with a preface by her husband, P.B. Shelley, who was obviously a better known person. Mary Shelley was an unknown quantity. And there's this preface which talks about what this novel is going to be. Of course, there's the difference between what the preface talks about the agenda of the novel and what the novel actually says. But anyway, when it came out and the critics were up in arms saying, how can somebody write such a blasphemous novel? Of course, it is P.B. Shelley, the atheist P.B. Shelley. And of course, it is dedicated to William Godwin, that anarchist, all the troublemakers. Then we discover, the critics, unfortunately for them, discovered that it was by a woman. And believe you me, if hell could freeze over, it did. And they were up in arms. A woman of 19 writing such a blasphemous story. Of course, they were too discreet to probably suggest what was she smoking. But that is what prompts Mary Shelley to write her famous introduction to the 1831 edition, where she says, look, this is the story behind all of this. But if you read that letter carefully also, it is so interesting, the two voices that she has. She says, oh, I was a silent spectator. These men were debating about science, because as we all know famously that the novel came out of a ghost story writing competition. Byron, P.B. Shelley, and there was Byron's physician and Mary Shelley. They all decided that Byron came up with this bright idea that let us all write a ghost story. Poor Mary Shelley couldn't think of an idea, and she heard all these men debating about the latest developments in science. She's a silent spectator. And yet, when she's writing that letter, she's finding a voice. So what is she doing? She's playing up. On the one hand, she's playing up to the stereotype of being the silent, subservient woman. On the other hand, her writing, both the letter and the novel, is challenging that. So perhaps that's how you challenge patriarchy.
A big round of applause for all our panelists. Since we're talking about the voice, it's time we allow the audience members to find a voice and shoot all the questions to the brilliant panel that we have. We have around 10 minutes. Keep your questions short, to the point, and please introduce yourselves before posing your questions. Shrabusti was my batchmate, a very dear friend of mine when I was doing my graduation from Loreto College. She went on to do her second master's in DESNU and is among the audience, and gives me great pleasure to introduce her as a first person who's asking a question here.
Thank you so much, Malika. My question is actually for Bula ma'am, Professor Bhodro. As you were talking about Ghore Baire, and I wanted to ask you this. When Rabindranath himself had written in Monihara that মেয়ে মানুষের কাঁচা আম ঝাল লঙ্কা আর কড়া স্বামী বেশি পছন্দ. So that is something that Rabindranath has made clear in multiple texts, not just in Ghore Baire. My question to you is, when Rabindranath is carving out characters like Nikhilesh and Shondeep, is he kind of making a distinction between masculinity in Nikhilesh and hyper-masculinity in Shondeep? That is one question that I really had for you. Thank you, ma'am.
You give me more opportunity. Thank you. Actually, I see Rabindranath's Ghore Baire in a different, from a different lens. So, Rabindranath here is after the Swadeshis, who actually are saying that only nationalist expression is to burn the foreign clothes. This is what I see Rabindranath's primary position, to say something different from the so-called Swadeshis, because he is not one of them. He clearly has been protagonist of that in his articles on nationalism and many umpteen number of writing. So Nikhilesh and Shandip are both actually secondary character. What he wanted to do actually, probably, I would say always probably, because Rabindranath is not defending himself, so naturally I would say probably, that Nikhilesh represents those non-Swadeshis who are much calm, quiet, wise individuals. Think twice before that. If you say to the poor subjects to burn clothes, whatever they have, because they are foreign, there is going to be a devastation on economy. That the Swadeshis are not thinking. So Nikhilesh represents, on the one hand, Rabindranath's own position on nationalism, and Shandip represents Rabindranath's opposite position on nationalism. So Shandip is, that's why, probably represented by Rabindranath as a little bit toxic. But, I'm sorry, Nikhilesh, the other, and Shandip the toxic. Nikhilesh is very wise. ওই যে ওর স্ত্রী তো বলছে যে ভীষণ শান্ত, এই ভীষণ শান্ত এই দুটো শব্দের মধ্যে দুটো মিনিং আছে। একটা হচ্ছে অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েটিভ ওয়ান, একটা কোয়াইট ডিপ্রিসিয়েটিভ। এত শান্ত হবার কি আছে বাবা? মাঝে মাঝে নিখিলেশকে ওর মনে হয়েছে যে নিখিলেশ একটু জেগে উঠলে পারে। রবীন্দ্রনাথ লিখছেন নিখিলেশ আর একটু বললে পারে, নিখিলেশ একটু প্রোটেস্ট করলে পারে। অর্থাৎ রবীন্দ্রনাথ কিন্তু তাই চাইছেন যে প্রোটেস্টটা হোক। ফলে এর মধ্যে একটা ব্রডার পার্সপেক্টিভ আছে রবীন্দ্রনাথের ঘরে বাড়ি, টু মি একটা ব্রডার পার্সপেক্টিভ আছে, যেটা রবীন্দ্রনাথ সিম্বলিক্যালি প্রেজেন্ট করার চেষ্টা করছেন থ্রু সন্দীপ অ্যান্ড নিখিলেশ। On the other hand, Bimala to me is far subservient. Rabindranath's projection. Bimala, I mean, Rabindranath could never portray Bimala as independent one, very independent one, who takes her own decision like Paroma or Tabu in Ostitto, or even Rekha in the end of Ijazat, because it is 19th century. I would give Rabindranath the contextual benefit because it is 19th century, and sitting in 21st century to say that, Bimala should have taken a decision, সন্দীপকে গুলি মারো, নিখিলেশকে গুলি মারো, আমি এটা চাই। আমরা তো এই কথা বলে থাকি, ভাড় মে যাও, খারাপ করে যখন রেগে গিয়ে আমরা ঝগড়া করি যে ভাড় মে যাও, পেট্রিয়ার্কি দেখিও না। বাট Bimala could have never thought of that. So to give full credit to Rabindranath, that Rabindranath could go up to that, to bring up Bimala to us. রবীন্দ্রনাথের এরকম নভেল খুব কম আছে, গল্প বলা যেতে পারে বেশ কিছু আছে, কিন্তু নভেল কম আছে যেখানে women are trying to be somewhat agentic. আমি এইভাবেই উত্তরটা দিতে পারবো, কারণ আমার কাছে ব্রডার পার্সপেক্টিভটা, অ্যাজ এ সোশিয়োলজিস্ট, দ্য সোশ্যাল পার্সপেক্টিভ ইজ অ্যাকচুয়ালি মোর ইম্পর্টেন্ট দ্যান দ্য লোকাল ওয়ান। হ্যাঁ, সিরিয়ালাইজড। No, there was pressure on Rabindranath, of course, from both sides, that which one Rabindranath belongs to. So that's why when Rabindranath gave up the Nobel Prize, you don't see much appreciation from the, political leaders. They were kind of silent. That Rabindranath gave up his Nobel Prize in protest of Jallianwala Bagh, which Gandhi did nothing whatsoever. But Rabindranath was not praised by the so-called intelligentsia or the writers for doing this kind of thing. But he is the only one. So there is contradiction between Rabindranath's position and, of course, the so-called majority Swadeshi position. Rabindranath was fond of, that's why Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. His leader was basically Netaji, not Gandhi at all. I mean, this is another side.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? Oh, fantastic.
Baba.
No, this is not a question. Nana, this is to the entire panel. I wanted to talk to all of you about the fact that since we are talking about gender and we are talking about the fact that how stereotypification has been a part of the presentation. So my question was, in the presentation, we have seen a particular clip where Bimala is saying that আমাকে যদি তোমার স্বদেশীতে না লাগে তাহলে আমার কোনো প্রয়োজনীয়তা নেই। So for her, is that friendship and a kind of an extension of the nationalism that she is trying to portray? If so, then why is it that popularly we only talk about woman as the embodiment of land? For Bimola, the man is the embodiment of land. If any one of you can take up on that.
No, you have to understand one thing. Again, Rabindranath's purpose. Rabindranath is not portraying an independent woman coming out. Rabindranath portraying the contradiction between the public and the private. And in that contradiction, Sandeep comes out as strong because Sandeep is activist. Rabindranath did not have that much appreciation for that kind of activism, that Swadeshi kind of activism. Rabindranath had rather more appreciation for Sandeep type activism, that who understands first that locally his subjects, প্রজারা কত পরিমাণে দুঃখে পড়বে যদি এরকম করে আগুনে পোড়ায় জিনিস। সুতরাং সেইটাই কনভে করার চেষ্টা করছেন রবীন্দ্রনাথ থ্রু বিমলা। সেই জন্য বিমলা আর নিজেকে রবীন্দ্রনাথ বিমলার মুখ দিয়ে বলছেন বলে আমার মনে হয় যে আমি তোমার স্বদেশী ছাড়া আর কিছু জানতে চাই না। অর্থাৎ এখানে রবীন্দ্রনাথ যেন একটা মানে কাটেন তুলে ধরলেন যে বিমলা তুমি কিন্তু মনে রেখো যে সন্দীপের সঙ্গে তোমার যে সম্পর্ক, সেই সম্পর্কটা হচ্ছে স্বদেশীতে সাহায্য করা, তোমার স্বামীর বিরুদ্ধে গিয়ে, বাকি জিনিস কিন্তু তোমার নয়। কিন্তু সন্দীপ কিন্তু তা নয়। সন্দীপ কিন্তু, আমি এখানে সন্দীপকে মানে রবীন্দ্রনাথকেও বলবো যে সন্দীপকে এই প্রোটাগনিস্ট করে রবীন্দ্রনাথ ভালো করেছেন, যে আমি তোমাকেও চাই, স্বদেশীও চাই। তো সত্যি কথা তা হতে না, সিনেমাতে তো স্টেটমেন্ট স্যাটেল হতে পারতো। আমার মনে হয় না যে সত্যজিৎ রায়ের এখানে কোনো প্রয়োজন ছিল 19th সেঞ্চুরি সিনেমাতে একটা ভাব দেখানো যে সন্দীপ অ্যাকচুয়ালি চুম্বন করিলেন বিমলাকে, এটাও দরকার ছিল না। সে এখন ওটা একটা অন্য লাইনে চলে যাবে, সিনেমাটিক পজিশনে চলে যাবে। হ্যাঁ, সিনেমাটিক পজিশনে চলে যাবে।
প্রফেসর অরিন্দম বাসু,
আমি একটা জিনিস, ইট ইজ ওপেন টু এভরিওয়ান। মানে আমরা রবীন্দ্রনাথকে নিয়ে যখন আলোচনা করছি, রবীন্দ্রনাথ তো মানে আমি এক সবটা পড়ে উঠতে পারিনি, পারবও না হয়তো সারা জীবনে, কিন্তু আমার মনে হয়েছে যে মানে রবীন্দ্রনাথ in a way he has accepted his failure of portraying a woman the way he should। সাধারণ মেয়ে কবিতাটায় যদি আমরা দেখি, যেখানে বলছে শরৎবাবু তুমি কি সহজভাবে মেয়েদের মহান করে তুলতে পারো, কিন্তু আমার মেয়েরা তো অন্তঃপুরের মেয়ে, আমার মেয়েরা কথা বলতে পারে না সাবলীলভাবে, আমার মেয়েরা লন্ডনে গিয়ে পড়াশুনো করতে পারে না, তারা বিদুষী হতে পারে না। ইন দ্যাট কনটেক্সট অলসো এই সময় যদি আমরা কথা বলি, তাহলে আমরা শরৎচন্দ্র চট্টোপাধ্যায়কে নিয়ে আমাদের মনে হয় ইকুয়ালি একটু কথা বলা উচিত, যেখানে শরৎচন্দ্র চট্টোপাধ্যায় সিউডোনেম, দুটো মেয়ের সিউডোনেমে লিখতেন, অনিলা দেবী এবং আরেকজন আমি ভুলে যাচ্ছি। সো দ্য ভয়েস অফ দ্য উমেন ওই সময় আই থিঙ্ক শরৎচন্দ্র চট্টোপাধ্যায়, মানে ইউ অল ক্যান প্লিজ, you all know more than me, আমার মনে হয় is equally important when we talk of Rabindranath and the voice of women. We should also think of Porinita, and we should also think of Paro, and we should also think of the characters Sharachandra Chattopadhyay created, who were much more ahead of their times. And Datta, please you all just
no, I was thinking about Srikanto, Arindamda, because লাস্টে আপনি বলুন যেটা অভয়া শ্রীকান্ত, অভয়া না রাজলক্ষ্মী না ম্যাম, অভয়া শ্রীকান্ত, অভয়া শ্রীকান্ত। I was thinking of Abhaya Srikanto, where what does Abhaya say? Abhaya socially though ostracized because she has left her husband, and then she comes to Srikanto, and Srikanto তাকে বলছেন না না, he is trying to take an escapist route, যে আমি তো আপনাকে তো জাজ করব না, আমি আপনাকে জাজ করব না, না না ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে, although we don't know whether Srikanto is probably also co-opted by a patriarchal society and is judgmental. And then Abhaya turns around and say, which I think at that point in time, given the social context, is quite revolutionary. She turns around and says, কেন শ্রীকান্ত বাবু আপনি কি সমাজের বাইরে? So she is implicating him in the Samaj which Srikanto is trying to escape. So what can be more revolutionary than that statement?
I think
Arindam, I consider Rabindranath a constrained personality, because Rabindranath understood that if he goes more with that, with Bimala or Charulata, then Rabindranath is transgressing the centuries, times boundaries. And Rabindranath was constrained. That's why Rabindranath gave her daughters in early marriage, for which Rabindranath was immensely criticized. But Sharatchandra is not constrained that way. Sharatchandra deals with the ground people, so much more liberated. Rabindranath deals with upper class.
With my apologies to all the Rabindranath admirers, perhaps that is the reason why he never came out openly to support Jivanananda Das.
Right.
Shonibare Chittite, he had very slanted manner. He had written about a new poet who's trying to experiment and who's bringing out new words and language of poem, but he never went out directly. And, and Jivanananda Das just waited for one endorsement from this poet so that his poems would be read. So he became, Rabindranath Das became great posthumously. During his lifetime, he was always a very conflicted man. So Rabindranath was very limited, and other than the psyche that he went through, he also had his family compulsions. We have to understand that they belong to a very rich business family, and they had to keep the
first bourgeoisie.
British, absolutely, they had to balance the tight rope, and so he was never
outside of a class location.
Absolutely. So he tried to remain within the brackets. Yeah.
I think Mallika has shown us one way, history rather, that how historically we can enrich ourselves and bridge the past and the future through films. So I want to give a special thanks to HOD of history, Mallika Raichaudhuri. So big applause for Mallika.
I'm extremely humbled, not only for your very kind and generous words, none of which I deserve, but for enriching this afternoon. All of you, Professor Bhodro, she has had a very grueling schedule. Ek kothay raji holen, ami apluto, ghorbito je ami ei সংস্থার সঙ্গে যুক্ত, and extremely humbled. Thank you so much, ma'am. Professor Aninta Mukherjee, a fellow Scorpio, who has been very, very busy with her commitments as the HOD of Psychology Department, and Professor Madhuchanda Raichaudhuri, the absolute rock star that she is. She's opened up a gamut of questions, and something that we'll take away from today's first session. A big round of applause as we conclude the first session. I think it's time that we start with the second film montage. Could we help? I'd request the lights to be turned off for the dais. Volunteers, please remove the water bottles that have been used and replace the ones with the fresh ones. Sorry for this public service announcement. The second session would be concentrating and focusing on Satyajit Ray's films. I will not be giving too much of text in the following snippets. Most of us have watched the movies. The first feature would have a 10-minute voiceover without subtitles, so I'd request all of you to strain your ears and also to keep silence, as this is not a soundproof auditorium. The session would have eminent panelists, and I'm extremely proud and grateful to have Professor Moni Kinkini Basu among us. She's supposed to be an authority on gender studies and films. Professor Jhumur Dattagupta, a big round of applause. What a sweetheart she is. She's the head of journalism and mass comm. Professor Shoykot Mojumdar, an absolute thorough professional. He's got multiple commitments with the media and the mass comm sector, not just as a department here. And Ms. Rituparna Sarkar, the nodal officer of the anti-ragging committee, so best behavior, all of you. And she's also the head of Campus to Corporate Center here. A big round of applause to all our panelists before we start showing the second film montage.
Strong characterization has been, of course, an undeniable ingredient of all Ray's movies, as are a handful of other important components of movie making that make his movies unique and out of the world. Today I have garnered for you a handful of female characters from Ray's contingent. Women so much of flesh, blood, feeling, emotion, ideas and opinion. Women who are not mere figments of fancy or mere decorative pieces. Charu in Charulata. Inhabiting a world of her own, of that of poetry, literature and music, spiritless Charu sleepwalks in the palatial mansion of her publisher husband, amply befitted with servants and all other comforts. Her intellect and her senses cheer and soar when her husband's cousin Amol walks into their lives, leading to tragic complications. In this 1964 Bengali epic by Ray based on Tagore's story Nashtameed.
কর্তব্য চটি
দাদার কি সৌভাগ্য
তোমারও হবে
কি চটি
বউ কোথায় যাওয়া হয়েছিল
কার্তিকের দোকানে একটা খাতা কিনে
Her isolation, her artistic thirst in pursuit, her moral dilemmas, her frustrations, her delights and her yearnings are so delicately brought forth with a minimum of dialogues by Madhavi Mukherjee under the able guidance and deft craftsmanship of Ray.
তুমি মনমতো দত্তের লেখা পড়েছো?
না
পড়েছো?
পড়েছি
কলকণ্ঠ
গলগণ্ড
কলকণ্ঠ
গলগণ্ড পড়েছি গত মাসে সরোরহে
তোমার মনমতো দত্তের লেখা ভালো লাগে না? রুচির অভাব
Murnoye in Tin Kanya. On the threshold of adulthood but still adamantly holding on to a vagabond world of childish adolescence, tomboyish Murnoye doesn't agree to conform to the duties of a traditional Indian wife, thereby scandalizing a whole village in this 1961 three-story anthology movie based on the short stories of Tagore. Murnoye's coming of age, arrival to womanhood, her mischief, her adamancy, her innocence, her vivacious youth and charm are so adequately captured by Aparna Sen and light-heartedly rendered by Ray's storytelling. Aparna and Aranir Dinratri, sophisticated, intelligent, independent, enigmatic and extremely beautiful Aparna had grown up motherless. The tragedy of his death also makes her grounded, calm and collected, and she is pitted against swashbuckling, cocky and carefree Asim, turned loose in the boundless possibilities of the jungle. In this 1970 classic by Ray based on Sunil Gangotpatyay's novel.
মনে হচ্ছিল জানেন যে ভদ্রলোকের কনফিডেন্সটা একটু থেতলে দিতে পারলে বেশ হয়
সেই কনফিডেন্স আর নেই আপনার থেকে ঠেকলে গিয়েছে কিন্তু একটা ব্যাপারে বারবার গোলমাল হয়ে যাচ্ছে আপনাকে কিছুতেই ঠিক বুঝে উঠতে পারছি না কেন বলুন তো
Her composure and intelligence, her delicate, good-natured acceptance of life's realities, so effectively sketched by Ray and so elegantly played by Sharmila Tagore, which leaves not only Asim but also the viewers spellbound.
দূরে পাহাড়ের গায়ে বনে আগুন লেগেছে। সেই আগুন দেখে আমি অজ্ঞান হয়ে গেছিলাম। আপনি বোধহয় কোনো জীবনে বড় দুঃখ পাননি, তাই না?
Arati in Mahanagar, conservative and caring mother, duty-bound wife and traditional daughter-in-law, Arati comes into terms with herself and her family when she's pushed into the industrial world of the big city, sharing the financial responsibilities shoulder to shoulder with her husband in this 1963 movie by Ray.
ওদের ব্যাপারটা জানা না, ঘাড়ে কিছু পুষে এসে জুটেছে, ফলে দুজনকেই 10টা 5টা করতে হচ্ছে।
দুজন মানে?
হাজব্যান্ড অ্যান্ড ওয়াইফ। Wanted smart and attractive young woman to serve as a sales
the changing role of a man within the domestic household. How do you as a man see this?
First, I would like to thank Mulika and Department of History for inviting me for this panel and give me the opportunity to share the stage with my esteemed colleagues. So this is something, I suppose this is a very difficult situation for a person who is, like many others in this auditorium, on stage and in the audience, who are awestruck with Satyajit Ray all the life. But still we have what I suppose that this is something which the observations which from my personal observation while watching Satyajit Ray's films. And another thing, while watching Satyajit Ray's film, I always thought, still I think that the realization or the perception of the films changes from time to time. And I always find that he tried to show every aspect of the persona, be it masculinity, be it femininity, within and through his characters. And Aruna Dinratri, Maulika, we were mentioning Aruna Dinratri. Aruna Dinratri, I always consider, this is my personal opinion, once again, many will differ with me maybe, but I always consider that after post Pather Panchali, Aruna Dinratri, for me is the, and before of course the Gupi Bagha series is different. Post Pather Panchali, Aruna Dinratri is the best creation by Ray. It's my personal opinion once again. And in this film, different shades of the characters have been, let me take that scene which you were referring. I always think that it's a combination of James and what Satyajit Ray wanted to portray through that film and through that particular scene which you were mentioning. এবং প্রত্যেকের সৌমিত্র চট্টোপাধ্যায়, শুভেন্দু চট্টোপাধ্যায়, রবি ঘোষ এবং সমিত ভঞ্জ, প্রত্যেকের যে ডিফারেন্ট এক্সপ্রেশনস, সেটা ওই সিকোয়েন্সটাকে একটা অন্য লেভেলে নিয়ে গেছে। অ্যান্ড somebody is, and every character is having the different aspects of the masculinity, the quote unquote, has been portrayed through that one particular scene. Someone is street smart, someone is naturally smart, and this contrast you were mentioning that scene particularly, এবং এখানে আমার মনে হয়েছে যে সৌমিত্র চট্টোপাধ্যায় এবং রবি ঘোষের যে দুটো এক্সপ্রেশন, that was absolutely portrayed, and each one is foil to each other. And এবং এই ছবিতেই, এই অরণ্যের দিনরাত্রিতেই সমিত ভঞ্জর ক্যারেক্টার, হরি ক্যারেক্টার, এই ক্যারেক্টারটা আমার পরে মনে হয়েছে, I always feel that Satyajit Ray was a director who always was much ahead of his time. And nowadays we talk about depression, we talk about melancholy, we talk about depression from each stage of life. But how a person who was depressed by some affairs of his past life, and he rediscovers himself in a complete new atmosphere, that has been portrayed by Shumit Bhanjo through the character of Hori. So all the characters, and each four characters, those are different. And the famous novel written by Sunil Gangopadhyay, which was Satyajit Ray made necessary changes in the script for the film. And অরণ্যের দিনরাত্রি এমন একটা ছবি যেটা আমার মনে হয়েছে যে বহু বাঙালি পুরুষ নিজেদের আইডেন্টিফাই করতে পেরেছেন যে ছবিটার দিয়ে, ক্যারেক্টারটা দেখে। সুনীল গঙ্গোপাধ্যায়ের অরণ্যের দিনরাত্রি যারা পড়েছেন তারা পড়েছেন, আর যারা, আমার মনে হয় সত্যজিৎ রায়ের অরণ্যের দিনরাত্রি ছবিটাও যারা দেখেছেন, they could identify themselves with the characters. And that is one, I should say that the masculinity, quote unquote, once again, which Satyajit Ray wanted to show, has been perfectly displayed through these characters.
Thank you, Shoikat sir. Now a common question to Rituparna madam and Moni Kinkini madam. the idea of desire, you know. For instance, Shomaptite, Aparna Sen's character's only desire is to be, footloose, fancy free, ekটু দোলনায়, ঝুললাম, পেয়ারা খেলাম, পেয়ারা গাছের উপরে উঠলাম, বদমাইশি করা, দুষ্টুমি করা. Posit that against the desire that a woman in Oranye Din Ratri, the widowed, sister-in-law of Shormila Thakur has, that she finds a possible romantic connection with Shubhendu Chatterjee's character, and she offers herself quite blatantly, quite brazenly, that how would it be if we were to be together. If you want, we can have a glimpse of those clips, or we can straight away enter the discussion.
Hey, before I'm sorry, before you answer that, because that's something that was on my mind. While you are discussing these characters, I would also to look at the other end of Satyajit Ray's paradigm of, why don't we look at the minor characters but very important characters, and characters that show significant understanding of modern women, like Nojor Bibi in Chiriyakhana, or Damayanti, a heroine who goes missing in Chiriyakhana, or the interrogator or the inquirer, the journalist in Nayok, Aparna Sen. So if you put these characters, see, Satyajit Ray himself evolved. His earlier films had one kind of woman characters. You see it with the character of Aparna Sen, Devi, Oranye Din Ratri, Nayok. You see the evolving of the character, of the woman character. Similarly, on the other end of the masculinity factor that she was talking about, if you look at Dhritiman Chatterjee or Borun Chando or Pradeep, the way he has brought them in the three films as the modern, as the metrosexual men of the modern times, and three aspects: one a struggler, one an established person, and the other an aspirant. And as a foil, he brings in the smart villain, WWW, the PR guy Robbie Ghosh in Jono Aronno. Okay, so when we are talking about Ray and his society and also the media, so instead of only gender, if we could also broaden the discussion and bring in these characters who actually portray that entire gamut of the society. Means, now if we can continue.
অরিন্দমদা যেটা সাজেস্ট করছে সেটা করাই যায়, কিন্তু since we decided to restrict our discussion, because see, it will open up a huge sphere which we will not be able to, because the entire discussion we are supposed to be winding up within 45 minutes, if I'm given to understand correctly. So I don't think that would be a possibility to, encompass Ray if we have to take all the characters. Since we decided to pick and choose few films, we have restricted our discussion to that only. So should we do that, or?
I can just talk a little about what Arunanda was saying, if everyone is okay with it. I was also thinking, Arunanda, in terms of the characters presented in the two counterfoils, as in
of the gender, the stereotype of man, and what exactly is Mahapurush holding for us. And you are obviously looking at the misrepresentation as well as the elongated idea of self and the inflated ego, and also the fear. So there are certain aspects of gender identity that goes beyond the concept of just feminine and masculine. That can be the sexual tension that human beings as it is
have. Now when you're talking about the character of Shormila Tagore in Nayok, you are obviously opening the gamut of looking at the counter gaze at the Mahanayok, Uttam Kumar, who is presented as the Nayok here. So when you are looking at the man, quote unquote, through the lens of the woman, that is exactly how if you remember Charulata, the famous scene with the this binocular. So when you are looking at the man who is a seller through the binocular, the gaze is directly getting channelized through a means of looking. The means is, what is the purpose of the binocular? To bring the far near. So the concept of looking at a gender identity by another gendered person, or somebody who's carrying the signs of another gender, physically at least, is problematized here. So naturally, when when Ray was trying to look at these women, he was perhaps with his exposure to Shaw and Ibsen, trying to look at women from the perspective of the voyeur, who is also developing a counter voyeurism, because he is not really only interested in looking at the two genders, but he's also trying to find out the canal between, and trying to find out that gaze perhaps is not really gendered. It can be more than what the mere gender is holding for us, or the sexuality is holding for us. So I think that, yeah, I mean, of course, we can obviously go to, if we can go to Fellini, we can talk about negative space, we can also talk about vacant space, we can talk about silence, and we can also talk about T.S. Eliot. So all of this we can talk about, but then like Rutuparnadi said, since I'm answering your question, that has already given us another completely different channel. So I think I'll go back to the moderator, because the moderator might be fuming because we are consuming all the time. So yes, moderator ma'am.
Professor Basu and Mr. Shorkar, my question remains the same. How would you classify desire in Satyajit Ray's films? It's a question that is actually panned out to all the panelists, but we'll begin with the both of you first.
Mine? So first I would like to, my analysis, my take on the desire of Soumitra in Samapti. So what do you think? That I'm asking because it's a very popular film of Ray. And what do you think that when you were watching, the Mrinmoy's husband, is he very that sensitive person or maybe empathetic? What is your take? I'm just asking to the audience.
Yes, Shrabasti, please.
Ma'am, thank you for this question. Actually, when you're talking about desire in Samapti, like you rightly pointed out a few minutes back, that there is a difference between the movie and the text. So in the movie, it's the desire of Mrinmoy is not really, it does not come out as strongly as it comes out in the text. In the text, I will go back to the text, which is a favorite of mine, that it is a transformation of a girl who wants to play around, the desire to play, the desire to be naughty, the desire to be mischievous, transforming into the teenagers or the adulting woman's desires of companionship, of the softer feelings. So that is something that I found very striking. So it's not really about Ray's description or Ray's narrative that brings out the desire here. It's more of Tagore's narrative. So that is something that strikes me whenever we talk
in
about
Samapti, we are getting the Mrinmoy's character like the one little girl, maybe very childish, and suddenly after the 3 months or maybe the 6 months break, now she is the threshold in the womanhood and waiting for her husband, and we are discovering one letter যেখানে লেখা ছিল যে তোমার পাগলি তুমি ফিরে এসো, and after that the submissions, the গড় হয়ে প্রণাম করা. So this is a ultimate submissions, and we can say that it is a desire which was reflected through the very stereotypical narrative which we are not getting in race films, because here the desire and also the the particular character, the Mrinmoy's husband, most probably the name of that character was Omullo. He was fascinated, he was attracted to Mrinmoy because he was mama's boy, he was very methodical, organized, highly educated, aspired to be a lawyer, and on the opposite side, Mrinmoy, like it's like a pagla hawa ba jhoro hawa, always scandalized by the villagers and the relatives, and not bothering anything. So these opposite attracts, these formula is actually very much applicable for them. But ultimately, when he left newlywed wife and he was ওকে বন্ধ করে রাখা হয়েছিল একদিন ঘরের মধ্যে বিয়ের পরে যখন ও গাছ থেকে নেমে চলে গিয়েছিল বাসর রাতে ফুলসজ্জার রাতে হাজব্যান্ডের সাথে থাকেনি, সেই দ্যাট র মৃন্ময়ী, it was it was not accepted by her husband. So the so-called educated husband, he was so restless, so disappointed, so depressed that he quit the scene. ও কলকাতায় চলে গেছে এবং ওর মা বাবার কাছে ফিরিয়ে দিয়ে গেছে যে মেবি হয়তো বিয়েটা আর টিকলো না বা নাও থাকতে পারে। সো দিস কাইন্ড অফ ডিজায়ার উই আর গেটিং, দ্যাট বিফোর ম্যারেজ অ্যান্ড আফটার ম্যারেজ দ্য ডিজায়ার অফ আ মেন, it was very much reflected, and we are getting it in a very stereotypical narrative we are getting in Shamapti, and this is the desire we are getting. And not only that, the desire of মৃন্ময়ী, যার এতদিন কিছুই করার ছিল না, সে কী করবে সেটাই জানতো না, আলটিমেটলি অল অফ আ সাডেন আফটার 6 months she wanted to be an ideal bride and woman for her husband. So this is striking, and this part is very fascinating, and and little bit, though we are in our teenage days and the school days, we are very much fascinated about Shamapti, but I think that Shamapti is the true or the real, and we can say that's appropriate name, that Shamapti is really the Shamapti of the children, the child inside Mrinmoy. It was totally shesh hoye gelo. So I think the name is also very relevant.
Ma'am, actually, if the question of desire comes, one striking scene I remember, I suppose all of us remember, in fact, the character which is less talked about in Aranya Dinratri, but one of the major female character, that is, the name was, Kaveri Bose played, Joya, played by Kaveri Bose. That was a very striking character, and in fact, there was a sequence between Kaveri Bosu and Shubhendu Chattopadhyay, a very intimate sequence, যেখানে কাবেরী বসুর, আমি এক্স্যাক্ট ডায়ালগটা মনে করতে পারছি না, হ্যাঁ একটু দেখতে পারি আমরা।
Male gaze-টা কতটাই ambient, হ্যাঁ? Simi Garewal is portraying a Santal house help. আর আমি এটা একটু মানে জাস্ট বলে সিনটাতে যাচ্ছি। Very open sexualized gaze towards the exotic tribal woman.
सरकार ये बड़ी गंदी औरतें, सरकार गंदी मेरी नौकरी के सवाल, सरकार क्या करेगा सरकार?
এটা হলো কফি।
কি হলো? আপনি কি কোল্ড কফি চেয়েছিলেন? মিসেস ত্রিপাঠী,
আমার কেমন দেখাচ্ছে বলুন? সাঁওতালদের ছাড়া মানায় না বলেছিলেন?
না মানে
হাঁ করে দেখছেন কি? বলুন কেমন দেখাচ্ছে আমায়?
ভালো।
তাহলে আপনি কি ভূত দেখছেন? ভূতই তো। স্বামী মরে গেলে শুধু স্বামী তো মরে না, আমার স্বামী সুইসাইড করেছিল জানেন?
সে কি? কেন?
তা কি করে জানবো? এখানে তো নয়, বিলেতে। আর কেউ ছিল বোধহয়। আপনার নার্ভাস লাগছে?
না,
আমার লাগছে। দেখুন ওটা আমাদের গাড়ি নয়। হলো তো কফি খাওয়া।
I have been given the unfortunate news that Mrs. Sharkar might be leaving. I wanted to also show one of the scenes that she suggested about how openly a woman is saying, একটু ঠিক করে লেটারটা লেখা গেল না, লাভ লেটারটা, ওই সিনটাকে আমরা একটু দেখে তারপরে ওটার একটু মন্তব্য করে তাহলে আপনাকে টাটা বাই বাই করতে পারি।
হরে, এই হরে, তোকে যে মেয়েটা লেঙ্গি মারলো, তুই ঘা কত কষিয়ে দিলি না কেন? ও যে স্ট্রেট ব্যাটে খেলে ভাই, মেয়ে ছেলে গায়ে হাত তুলবে?
এই আদিম পরিবেশে দুদিন থাক, দেখবি ঘাটা সব শুকিয়ে গেছে।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, তোদের কি এছাড়া অন্য কোনো টপিকস নেই? তোরা তোরা এমন ভাব করেছিল আমি ছাড়া অন্য কেউ প্রেম করে না। সঞ্জয় করে বসে মেয়েটা করে জিজ্ঞেস কর না। এই হ্যাঁ কি হিম্মত নেই তাই ইয়ে করতে পারো না, নাম করলেই সালা টদস করে লাল পড়ে। প্রেম তো সকলেই করে,
নট মি।
তোমার জোটে না তাই?
বাজে কথা বলিস না, বুঝছো ব্যাপার আমার কোনো ইন্টারেস্ট নেই, যদি না তাই।
ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে, তোকে বলছি এটার কারণ হলো বন্ধু হিসেবে তোর ব্যাপারটা তো আমরা ফিল করছি। আরে লেঙ্গি যদি মারতে হয় তো তুই মারবি, ও মারবে কেন? আমি মেরেছি, হয়েছে? সব লাভ হবে আমি জানি না, তোমাকে বলতে হবে, আমি জানতে চাই।
কি জানতে চাও?
কি হলো, এমন কি হলো যাতে সমস্ত হঠাৎ চেঞ্জ করে গেল? তোমাকে বলতেই হবে।
সব কথা বলা যায় না, তুমি জোর করো না প্লিজ।
তোমাকে বলতেই হবে। না তোমাকে ছাড়বো না।
কি হচ্ছে কি? ছাড়ো।
আমি তোমাকে ছাড়বো না।
লাগছে আমার।
তোমার কাছে কত জোর আমি দেখবো।
এই ছেলে মানুষের করছে হরি।
তুমি বলো বলো, তোমাকে বলতেই হবে, বলো।
না ছাড়লে আমি বলতে পারবো না।
ঠিক আছে বলো। এটা তো
আমার 5 পাতা চিঠির উত্তর এই চিঠি? আমার চিঠিটা পড়েছিলে? তার মানে বুঝেছিলে? I doubt it.
চিঠিতে কি যায় আসে? ও চিঠি পেটে আমার লেখা হয় না।
তবে লিখলে কেন? লিখলে কেন?
বারে তুমি চিঠি লিখে আমি উত্তর দেবো না? আর আমি তো ভেবে ভেবে লিখিনি, মাথা যা ইচ্ছে ফস করে লিখে ফেলেছি।
জানি।
আর তাছাড়া আমি লিখেছি যে আমি তোমায় ভালোবাসি না?
যাই হোক, আমারই অন্যায়, আমাকে ক্ষমা করো। আমার যে দোষ নেই তাতে আমি বলিনি, কিন্তু যে ওরকম চিঠি লিখে তাকে ভালোবাসা সম্ভব না, অন্তত আমার পক্ষে নয়। মিথ্যে বলে তো কোনো লাভ নেই, কদিন আর পরস্পরকে ঠকাবো বলো। আর তুমি এখন এসো, আমার এমনিতেই দেরি হয়ে গেছে, আর এভাবে ফস করে না বলে বেডরুমে চলে আসটা অত্যন্ত অন্যায়।
Rituparnadi, your comment on desire.
Okay. So, we just now have seen this particular scene where Shomit Bhanjo holds Aparna very closely, right? Now, vis-a-vis, if we compare this to the scene where Shomitra in Shamapti, there is a scene where Aparna had stolen his shoes, and Shomitra has to go back after that fiasco where he had come to see his prospective bride, that is. And in that particular scene, Aparna has thrown one pair of shoes, and he suddenly, on the way, he finds that one pair and the other is missing. She's hiding behind the tree. Shomitra comes. If you really have looked into the movie very closely, you will find Shomitra holds her very closely to the extent it's difficult for her to breathe. I find that was a very, very sensuous scene to have been depicted at that point of time. See, Ray has been a person who has never been over the top. He has always been very subtle in expressing his emotions, and in all his movies we know women have come out very well, all his women characters. To the extent, in this particular, I think there is a lot of sexual undertone in that particular scene where Shomitra holds her and ekta jhakuni day, but there is no exchange of word. And vis-a-vis the scene that we have just looked into here, the way Shomit Bhanjo, again he is also holding and kind of shaking, and Aparna remains unmoved. She clearly says, je erokom chithi lekhe tar songe prem kora jay na. And desire part, I would also like to touch base upon this, also the scene that we have seen, this widowed lady who is sexually, leading a very sex-starved life because she lost her husband at a very young age. And in this particular scene, we see that she humiliatingly fails. She just throws herself upon this particular character, Shubhendu, and he is not able to muster up enough courage to go ahead. Whereas in the memory game scene, there was a break where, if you all remember correctly, Shubhendu goes inside, and there's a particular scene where he caresses his hair and he fixes his hair, and he hums this song, Horete Bhromorelo Gunguniye. So we understand clearly that he is also inclined, right? But it's just that because of the societal pressure, the prejudice and the norms, the socioeconomic condition that we all lived at that particular point of time, I think it was very bold of Ray to have shown a widowed woman the way he has shown. I don't know whether the audience will agree with me or not. This is my take.
It was also mentioned in this same film, যখন ওরা বসে ওই আদিবাসী ভাটিখানায় গেছিল, তখন মানে ওই যে ড্রাঙ্কন ছিল, তখন সৌমিত্র বলছিল তুই বিয়ে টিয়ে করবি, চাকরি বাকরি করবি, to Sanjay, that means that you are a very common kind of Bangali. So you will lead this kind of normal life and without any like exceptional steps or maybe any courageous steps. So it was already mentioned in the film.
I think we'll get back to Shoikota. He was trying to talk about that particular scene. So if you continue from there.
Actually, ওই particular সিনটা যেটা ঋতুপর্ণা ম্যাডাম বললেন এক্স্যাক্টলি ওটাই আমিও বলতে চাইছিলাম যে দিস ক্যারেক্টার ইজ লেস টকড অ্যাবাউট দ্যান দ্য আদার ক্যারেক্টার্স, কিন্তু ওই একটা সিকোয়েন্সে সত্যজিৎ রে হ্যাজ শোড আস হাউ sensuality and sexuality can be shown with a very subtle manner. And তার আগে আমি যখন বলছিলাম যে I suppose the characters portrayed in the characters Ray portrayed in Orone Dinratri, many Bengali males could identify themselves. তাদের মধ্যে একটা ক্যারেক্টার ওই সঞ্জয় চরিত্রটাও, যেটা শুভেন্দু চট্টোপাধ্যায় প্লে করেছিলেন, and that kind of typical characters with the thoughts of সোশ্যাল প্রেশার্স, যেটা আপনি বলছিলেন ম্যাডাম, যে একটা ভেতরে আমার একটা desire রয়েছে, but I cannot express the desire, I cannot go to that extent. That is why he could not respond to that sequence, and that is once again what I said, I mean from the perspective of acting আমি বলতে পারি যে অরণ্যের দিনরাত্রি আমাদের কাছে এই জন্যই এতটাই ফেভারিট, এতটাই প্রিয় এই কারণে, বিকজ অফ all the actors could portray their characters so well. We never we thought at any moment it is always thought that the characters are moving around in front of us and not the actors. এবং এখানে প্রত্যেকটা ডিজায়ার তারা যেভাবে এক্সপ্রেস করেছেন, দ্য ক্যারেক্টার অফ হরি ইজ টোটালি অপোজিট টু দ্য ক্যারেক্টার অফ সঞ্জয়. And Hori and Sanjoy, both of them, they had their desire in their mind, but it was shown in two different ways. That is what I was saying.
If we talk about the sexuality part, we can also look into that particular aspect where Shomit Bhanjo flashes a note, and he is of this understanding that Duli, being a tribal woman, she is easily available, and as if sex can be bought. So when he flashes that note, and see, Duli is a woman who is in need of money because of the background that she comes from, and the moment she tries to grab, he says, "Omni lob legeche na." So in that particular scene, if we see when Shomit Bhanjo will go away to the city, he will go back to his city life, he wouldn't care a fig about this woman. So there is no emotion attached. It's simply desire. Simi Gariwal, the character, she plays Duli. Duli gives in because she is in need of money. And this particular gentleman simply thinks that sex can be bought, and she is somebody who is easily available because. So there is a striking contrast of how the urban milieu thought of the marginalized and the affluent. I think that also has been beautifully depicted.
No, I think here we can also take this into consideration, if you look at it, that Simi Garewal's character is more vocal about her desires, and for her, the intimate space is not a positive requirement for her to come out with her own sense of freedom and sexuality, which is required for the character of the widowed woman who has to do this over a cup of coffee in an intimate space and constantly under the fear of surveillance and being caught, because she said that eta amade gari na. So the moment she says that, she is also testifying to the fact that this could be another reading of the situation, that she is only going to be portraying her desires when she is not a part of the social, let's say, aspect of this family that she is living in, or she is not going to be directly answerable to the family. So this is where when you were discussing about the song, the concept of Bromor, that is also a problematic representation, because when you are basically looking at a character who is trying to present sexuality from the perspective of the man to be acceptable, and then from the perspective of the woman, the moment the woman comes up with that, it becomes problematic for the same man. So that of course is problematic. Now coming back to desire, I think one of the most potent presentations of desire in Ray was Charulata and the scene of the swing scene, which we are all aware of, the swinging between her family life and her desire. I think that for me was the ultimate presentation of desire, the open space and the presentation of the swing, the use of the swing rather. So yeah, I think I will not continue any further.
Very sorry for the, absolute rudeness that I had to step out. We were expecting VC sir to join us at this moment. However, he is in a very important meeting with Registrar sir, CFO sir, COE sir, and the OSO to the Chancellor at this very moment. Unfortunately, he has expressed his regrets to not join us right away, but he is there in spirit, and he has lauded all of us, panelists, all faculty members and students, for being a part of this event. Can we now open the questions to the audience? We are very greedy, so if Professor Bhodro is among us, I cannot help but open up the idea of desire and domesticity and sexual politics. That she's, but you are amader shorbe shorba.
এটা কি হচ্ছে? না না, প্রশ্ন নেই। এই যে চারটে মুভি ক্লিপিংস তোমরা দেখে, ও আমি আলাদা করে ডিজায়ার সেক্সুয়ালিটি বলছি না, আমার একটু একটা মিটিং ছিল। সিনেমাগুলো কি সমাপ্তি? অন্যের দিন আচ্ছা না, চারুলতা, actually Satyajit Ray's interview, what I saw, he told that any movie you want to redo, Satyajit Ray said, most of the movies, any movie you do not think that you want to redo or you have defects, he said, he thought and a minute and said, Charulata. So Satyajit Ray thinks Charulata is fault-free. And he has given enough to the agentic women to express, even when she did not express, and her husband suddenly found out. She was crying, Amol, Amol, amake keno chere gele, and then Bhupati finds that Amol, she is in love with Amol. So I would say that Satyajit Ray carried on a little bit of suppressive position here in terms of the desire, or I don't know in case of Charulata sexuality how much it played, but companionship and desire played a very critical role, and Rabindranath stopped. Rabindranath couldn't dare being in the 19th century or early 20th century. Satyajit Ray, see, I have one reservation about Satyajit Ray, that Satyajit Ray, though portrayed women in many, many casts, but if you remember Feluda, there is no woman. So, yeah, because I feel in some way or the other, Satyajit has two compartments, sort of thing, that when I do general movies, etc., then I bring out women, but women cannot be detective. I mean, women cannot actually pursue this. That actually, I think, portrayed in Charulata, Samapti, and also Mohanagar, that after all, she will give up the job when her husband is also giving up. There's this connection that I find that Satyajit Ray went 90 and then stopped. That last 10% of desire or expression of sexuality in women somehow made Satyajit somewhat scared. I don't know whether that is a 20th century Bengali psyche. Anindita would have been better off. Or it is a mentality that we feel that marriage is still monogamous. All other things are outside of the marriage mainstream. Marriage is still mainstream in India. সেই জন্যই মেয়েদের বিয়ে হচ্ছে না হলে বাবা মারা খুব চিন্তিত হন। ইনফ্যাক্ট আমার মেয়ে 30s-এ আর্লি 30s, তাকে জিজ্ঞেস করা হয় মাঝে মাঝে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় গেলে, তুই বিয়ে করছিস না কেন? না তোর বিয়ে হচ্ছে না। তো একদিন সে খুব রেগে গিয়েছিল, রেগে গিয়ে বলল, তুমি তোমার আবার বিয়ে, যাকে যে বলেছিল তাকে সে উত্তর দিয়েছে, আমরা সবাই একটু ভীত হয়ে গেছিলাম, এতটা রেগে যাওয়া ঠিক না ফর্মাল জায়গায়, কিন্তু সে রেগে গিয়ে উত্তর দিয়েছিল, তোমার আরেকটা বিয়ে করার ইচ্ছে কিন্তু করতে পারছো না, এই যে স্বামীটা আছে তাকে তুমি মোটে পছন্দ করছো না, তুমি আরেকটা বিয়ে করো, আমি দেখে শান্তি পাই, তাহলে আর আমার বিয়ে নেই, তুমি মাথা ঘামাবে না। তুমি কেন মাথা ঘামাচ্ছ? আমি বিয়ে করছি না, না হচ্ছে না, আশ্চর্য কথাবার্তা। এই যে করছি না বা হচ্ছে না, ফেসবুকে একটা ক্লিপিং ছিল, কে বলেছে হচ্ছে না, আমি করছি না, এও তো হতে পারে যে মেয়েরা বিয়ে করছে না, তার ইচ্ছে করছে না, বা বিয়ে ইজ নট অনলি লাইক ইউনো, না এটাই তো হচ্ছে কথা, এটাই তো হচ্ছে কথা যে মেয়েদের বিয়ে দেওয়া হয়, ওই দিলওয়ালে দুলহনিয়া লে যায়েঙ্গে, মানে দুলহনিয়া ক্যানট টেক দিলওয়ালে, মানে দুলহনিয়া লে যায়েঙ্গে দিলওয়ালে হয়নি। Oh my God, don't do that now. Dangerous proposition. No, it's 4. And some other day. Hold on a minute. Let's actually have this one. When she went to see me that for 5 minutes, she didn't tell me that you have to say something. So what I'm saying is completely extempore, and I have not a single got idea what I'm saying. So it's better we stop now. But I think Bengali movies as such, even now, except being unnecessarily, aggressive, does not portray sexuality in proper terms. Sex and sexuality are not similar. They did not understand that, and still I don't know. Current movies I cannot name much. One season I saw Sampurna in Hoichoi. There was a that I found in the second season is flopping, because I mean, as if there was no sign of her being tortured or pedophiled in the first season. Suddenly second season she develops all this. Suddenly at least you have to prove it. But we don't have to have the heroine pedophiled. We could have somebody else also. So I find it's hodgepodge. Maybe another Satyajit Ray or Mrilan Sen or even Tapan Sinha is needed to bring this out, that sex, sexuality, desire are not same, interconnected but not same. And movies on trans hasn't come up that way. That would be actually a move forward, because that way we can understand then only men, only women and trans. Movies, I do not know. I'm not a movie goer at the moment of the time for last 3-4 years. But has there been good trans movies on transgender?
ওই যে রিদ্ধির যেটার জন্য ন্যাশনাল অ্যাওয়ার্ড পেয়েছিল।
আচ্ছা, ওটা আমি দেখিনি, ওটা মিস করেছি। Very few. It hasn't been a trend. It has to be one. It has to be one. Then only. Nagor Kirtan. Right. That is the one I saw. Yeah, very problematic narrative. As if an apologetic narrative. Apologetic narrative.
আচ্ছা,
Okay.
আমাদের ম্যামের থেকে জ্ঞান অর্জন করার খিদেটা কোনোদিন মিটবে না। দিস ইজ সামথিং দ্যাট আই থিঙ্ক ইজ দ্য the highlight of this session. Thank you, second session panelists. Thank you, Rituparna Di, Moni Kinkini madam, Jhumur Di, Shoikat da. Thank you. Vishal ওদের জন্য একটু তালি হোক। Before we step out for refreshments and a group photo before that, I need to deliver the vote of thanks. It gives me great pleasure and honor to deliver the vote of thanks for today's event on gender and history. I'm extremely grateful
to Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir and Registrar Sir for approving of the program and for guiding the program with their esteemed counsel from time to time. Our Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Shubir Dhar, delivered an excellent address and, for personally speaking, for being the most patient and thoughtful mentor anyone could have ever asked for. The program would not have seen the light of the day had it not been for the IQAC of SNU greenlighting the program. The program would have remained a pipe dream had it not been for the enthusiastic support and hand-holding at every stage from each of our esteemed panelists. Professor Bula Bhadro for taking the time out of her extremely busy schedule, Professor Rituparna Sarkar, Professor Moni Kinkini Basu, Professor Jhumur Dattagupta, Professor Madhuchanda Rai Chaudhuri, Professor Shoikat Mojumdar, Professor Aninita Mukherjee. A huge round of applause to each of you. Thank you for your insights and wholehearted support. May your tribe grow. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Dean of MassCom, Professor Meenal Parikh, for supporting the event at every stage. Special thanks to Mr. Udit Sengupta for helping out with the creative and the media team for the FB live streaming. Mr. Shubhrajit Paul for lending IT support and Mr. Dipankar Mondal for ensuring technical support throughout the event. Special thanks to our spirited photographers for documenting the program. A big round of applause to all of you. I'm sure we will remember the program with much fondness because of these memorabilia. I thank all my wonderful colleagues, some of them who are not here right now but have been coming whenever they can, for turning up for this event and engaging in such a consummate fashion. Finally, a big shout out to my wonderful students. God knows how much I've shouted at you, been a real pain in your neck, sorry for that, but for practically being the backbone and spirit of this event. My best wishes and love to all of you. I thank everyone outside SNU who has shown up for this event. I now request all faculty members to come up for a group photo, after which we would have a group photo with all the students and faculty. Thank you.